Hey guys, Waddock Studios here, and today we're going to talk about something that has kind of been brewing in the Unreal Engine scene. Um, by now, many of you have probably heard of Thread Interactive and some of their videos, and it's just, um, you guys know me, you know my studio, especially if you're like a Patreon supporter or you've been a member of the Waddock Studios Discord or you've um, acquired or purchased or obtained them free through like a free giveaway, any of the assets that I have on Epic's Marketplace or the Unity Store, etc. And you know that I've I've been developing in Epic's ecosystem for a while. It's approaching more than 1 decade now without me giving away my age. But and I've tried to take a very neutral stance, because as a developer, I do see the changes that occur throughout an engine's life cycle through like, UDK, Unreal Engine 3, UE4, UE5. And, in some of my previous videos, I talk about like technology evolves and sometimes it's for better and sometimes it's for worse, or maybe you're stuck in this intermediate phase between two technologies where something isn't quite implemented fully, but that implementation breaks technologies that you lean on. Um, and I love Unreal Engine. And I've reiterated over and over again that I look at the minor versions of the engine as a target for me to hit. So while I may not always agree with, or I might express frustrations with some of the changes that Epic have done in later engine versions, and a perfect example is Unreal Engine 5.5 not supporting Lumen with SM5 and DX11 anymore, and you probably seen my post on the Epic forums about that, basically pleading for CVAR to return for a hotfix to re-allow non-hardware ray traced global illumination, so software ray traced global illumination, to return to Unreal Engine 5's future versions. I try not to take this stance like that's cut into stone, that's like, oh, it's Epic's fault or it's the dev's fault. Because at the end of the day, this is a partnership. And what sparked this for me is I watched this video called It's a Problem. And I don't know Jedi Exile. I'm actually going to go ahead and subscribe to him because this video here does a really good job, and it's called the Unreal
Well,
Engine
this is
problem. I'm going to pause it. But it does a really good job of taking a very non-biased approach of explaining what the actual problem is that everyone is talking about. And it does also a really good job of, without coming out and saying it in the way that I'm trying to explain now, that it's a shared responsibility. There's a partnership between developers and studios and Epic. And while, you'll see these phrases like, it's just a tool, it's the dev's fault. In the best way that I can say that you can't use that analogy in a vacuum is the next time you go to bring your vehicle into the shop, hand the mechanic a hammer and say, it's a tool. You should be able to do a great job and deliver excellent quality at fixing my vehicle. A hammer is a tool. But at the end of the day, does that tool do or give that person a really great starting point for the task that they're trying to achieve? And that's why I've reiterated through the past that the minor version that you pick for Unreal Engine is going to give you an easier or a harder time achieving the goal to obtaining the release on the target that you're aiming at, based on the feature set that is either fully implemented, partially implemented at some place you're going to have to take on the responsibility as a dev, regardless of how much, like how easy that path is or how hard it is. As a dev, you're going to have to make the choice of what engine or what tool to start with. And sometimes that's easier said than done. If you're an indie studio, it's usually really easy. Or say you're a solo dev, it's really easy to pivot. You're not trying to move an elephant. You're not trying to convince an additional 50 to 100 people or leadership or anyone else that 30 days, 60 days, 90 days into a sprint, hey, we have to pivot because it's going to be extremely hard to fully implement this subset of features or this additional extension in the RHI and in the API, versus if we simply went back to 427, we'll have an easier time hitting, say, a mobile target. Versus if you started in UE5, you're probably going to have some difficulty hitting frames or reining that engine back down to hit that mobile target, at least, like specifically if you didn't start developing, let me rephrase this, specifically if you started developing on mobile in, say, early versions of UE5, like not so much UE5.0, but say you started in UE5.1 or UE5.2, it's going to be drastically more problematic for you to implement features that are going to align with mobile hardware or lower end hardware than it would be if you was to go back to 427 or say 424. And the same thing goes for HTML5 support. Certain versions of the engine don't even have it implemented anymore. They pulled it out and deprecated it. But you can go back to say 417, 419, 422, and you'll see you can publish to HTML5. That's the point that I'm trying to make. You can't use this analogy that no one blames the canvas when a painting comes out bad. That is true, but artists blame their brushes for the quality of their strokes on a daily basis. And there is a partnership between Epic and the tool that they make and the hardware that is out at the time. Epic supported UE3 almost until halfway through the 8th gen consoles cycle. And you had hits. I mean, you had hits from Rocksteady. You had Batman. You had Mortal Kombat. You had Unreal Engine bangers. Not just Unreal Engine, but Unreal Engine 3 bangers constantly coming out at the birth of the 8th gen console cycle. And you had UE4 that was being supported like 4.9, 4.7 through 4.9 to 4.16 to 4.17. And 4.16, 4.17, that's when it hit its stride and you started seeing everybody jump to Unreal Engine 4. But by that time, I mean, the relationship between the tool and the target hardware was in sync. And that partnership between Epic's goals and developers' goals and the target hardware was in a certain state of harmony that we resulted in probably the best generation of consoles and games from that engine that we could have ever hoped for. And my point is that that's not the case with Unreal Engine 5. I love this engine. I love it no differently than I love my kids. I'm going to hope for the best. I'm going to help them step in as a developer, make pull requests, do whatever I can to try to help them. But it also means that you defend them whenever the defense is justified, but you also call them out on their BS so that they understand what their mistakes are and they can correct those mistakes or they can work on making themselves better. That's how you show love. You cannot blindly defend something and give them an out and say, oh, it's on the developers, when there's 20,000 pull requests sitting in main right now in source because developers are trying. And whenever Epic has their own agenda or their own target or their own game or their own needs or their own marketing strategies aimed at trying to compete with C4D or Houdini are ZBrush, are, delivering a pipeline that the short film industry, and Hollywood studios, non-game related portions of the engine. I mean, just look at the last year's licensing model change. Look at what happened there. And a lot of people agree with it and a lot of people disagree with it. I see the need for it. I'm super excited that that money isn't coming out of the Fortnite budget and that the Fortnite budget can be going back to quote unquote game features. But for the longest period of time there, a lot of the income that was coming into Epic was being invested into a portion of the industry, or a portion of um, the engine that I would say didn't have anything to do with really games. It was more about the 29, 30 frame per second cinematic and sequencer layer of the engine and the higher end rendering features. And I'm not mad at that because I use sequencer and I cut short films. I have them on my YouTube channel. I did a tribute to Epic when UE5 released, that ventures into ultra realism and short film territory, as well as my Money for Nothing Dire Straits video. But that was done in UE4 with ray tracing. But the point that I'm trying to make here is you're seeing a lot of content out here and people want to jump on this blame the devs or blame Unreal Engine bandwagon. And the truth of the matter is this is a partnership, and the engine's not quote unquote open source, it's source available. That means that developers that have the partnership with Epic, that have signed the EULA, can contribute back to source through PRs. But that doesn't obligate Epic to pull those pull requests. They can sit there for eternity because Epic has the freedom and the liberty to have their own agenda and their own goals. And whenever that partnership between Epic, the hardware, the big three, Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo, and PC, DirectX, whenever that partnership is in harmony and they're all on the same page, then the results are really good. But whenever that partnership deharmonizes or comes out of sync and you have an engine that's aiming far beyond the target hardware of the mass majority of consumers that exist, well, then you see the worst launch lineup and the worst console generation that we've had in modern day history. It's not rocket science. It is just logic and the way things are. And I'm not asking you to put on a tinfoil hat or anything like that. The writing's on the wall. I'm not blaming anyone. It's just a result of the way things have unfolded. Me personally, I love Unreal. I'm going to continue to do whatever I can to support them. I'm going to continue to make videos about how to achieve retro-based games, how to go back to retro development, stylistic development, the things that reminded me of why I fell in love with gaming to begin with, and rebalance the field, and and agree with a lot of you out there that say that gaming is not about approaching realism or trying to approach this Hollywood state. I love realistic games. I said it in my last video. I will probably always work on some form of realism in gaming at some point, state in time. But a gamer, a person that enjoys video games and that fell in love with gaming, the nostalgia for them is Mario and pixel-based games and the birthplace of 3D and stylized cartoonism in games. That offers a level of forgiveness. I went over this in the Return to Retro in my last video. The brain disconnects from realism and allows you to put yourself in a state of being able to have more fun because you're not nitpicking every little thing to death, and you're not pointing out things that should behave, perform, animate, or morph a certain way and going, nope, that's not right. Something about that is not right. Uncanny valley is a phrase or terminology that's been given to this. But I just wanted to speak on this just a little bit because I've tried not to to approach it or toss blame or express frustration in the midst of seeing all of these videos popping up. But I have made comments of like, when I see people wanting to instantly blame the devs for everything, they have a shared responsibility. They could have made a choice to some degree on where to start within the Unreal Engine family, because that's what it is. There's a family. If you wanted to as a dev, as this video outlines here, you could have gone back to Unreal Engine 3. And a lot of 8th gen developers did that. You could have stayed with UE4 and put more pressure on the big three to not need an exemption, to not need to, to hold Epic accountable to continue to support 427 longer through the Unreal Engine 5 development cycle, so you knew you could use it without risking, like having a huge risk going to 9th gen consoles. And Throne and Liberty did this, Hogwarts Legacy did this, a lot of developers did do this. They picked that path of least resistance. They chose stability over the newest feature set, and that's always a risk too. If developers don't jump on the next technological bandwagon, so to speak, early enough, and other developers do, then that gives that developer that followed that newer rendering pipeline a competitive advantage, especially if what they see being marketed from Epic as the next technological breakthrough, if that ends up garnering the hype with the community and it doesn't blow back in their face the way that it's just so happened to do. Gamers, as of right now, GPUs are hard to come by. They're very expensive. And not only that, the engines that have tried to utilize the latest technology aren't really utilizing it in a way to where games look drastically better, and the trade-off on the performance cost is relative to that look. So you're getting a little bit of a better look, a very small jump in visual fidelity, and it's 70% of your GPU budget. So of course this generation is going to push back. Of course you're going to have a blowback from, okay, maybe we're moving in the wrong direction and we need to rebalance this out. Maybe it's not about obtaining realism in every single game. Maybe it's not about using upscalers and DLL. I don't want to name off technologies because I don't want to call anybody out, but we know what the upscaler technologies are. And I guess I could call everybody out: DLSS, TSR, XESS, Pisser from PlayStation, PSSR. We can name them all off if we want to. But the point of the matter is that's the trend, that's the technology. We're basically downscaling images now to 640p in some cases, 720p, just to turn around and upscale them back up to 4K. And if you do a raw pixel comparison between the technologies we're doing nowadays to get that added bells and whistles and visual fidelity, and you go back to Unreal Engine 3 games, you go back to Batman, like is mentioned in this video here, which again, I'm not going to watch it while we're here. I'm going to finish up this talk, and I hope you guys give it a good watch. You'll see 1080p MSAA images that will surpass the quality of modern day rendering passes, and it's due to temporal smearing and the upscaling technology and all of the other things that are being tossed at us in modern tech. It's no different than the transition that we went through when we moved from CRT to LCD, and all of a sudden smearing was a thing, panel refreshes were a thing, latency between input and your panel was a thing. I'm not saying that OLED panels aren't amazing, because they are. I own one. But it's the transition and getting accustomed to the differences in the technology. And for some people and some devs and some studios and some hardware manufacturers, that comes easier than others. We have a problem. I will admit that. We have a problem. but it's not one person or one thing's issue. I'm not going to put Epic solely at blame here because they are trying to move forward. And I'm not going to put the devs solely at blame here because it's not one dev's fault. There's families working for these studios. There's been hundreds of thousands of layoffs in this industry due to a lot of the combined choices of the industry. So no, I'm not going to blame devs whenever they're probably out there trying to find another job and feed their family. Hopefully you guys can have a little bit of empathy and I didn't strike a chord or rub you the wrong way by being passionate about this subject. And again, I thank all my Patreon members and all of my subscribers. You guys are the best. I love y'all. But have a little bit of, I guess I'm just asking the general public, have a little bit of grace and forgiveness, and let's hope that things get better. But I don't, put the blame where it deserves to be, and that's shared across everyone. People are out here trying. The circumstances were almost like an aligned perfect storm. I'm going to continue to develop an Unreal Engine because I do believe in it. I do believe that the intentions were good. We have a lot of misalignment going on in leadership across the board, across all of these parts and pieces of these organizations that have made things a little difficult for our industry as a whole. But with that, I love you guys. Have a great weekend. If you're in the States, enjoy your holiday Monday. Happy Martin Luther King Day. Until next time, happy developing and toodles.